Immigration and the economy are undoubtedly the top issue on voters' minds headed into November, and those two issues are a direct referendum on our current leadership. But so is this, parental rights or the lack thereof. This next story is one that's becoming all too common, so let me give you the lowdown. Dan and Jennifer Mead were actively working with their daughter's public school after she was diagnosed with autism, meeting with school counselors and teachers to provide their daughter the best education plan as any parent would. But during this time, the school counselor and officials were hiding information that would indicate their daughter's social transition from female to male at school, removing male pronouns and masculine names from any documents that were sent home back to the Meads, correcting it back to her female pronouns and name. Well, the Meads discovered what was happening when the school mistakenly left on documents references to their daughter using male pronouns and a different name. So after confronting the school about that mistake, the Meads realized the school was lying to them about their daughter for several months, socially transitioning her at school and never notifying them. The school counselor had also given the Meads' daughter a book incentivizing homosexual relationships called Heartstopper Volume 1. Now, the Meads have filed a lawsuit against the Rockford Public School System, arguing that their policies and actions have violated their parental rights, which is constitutionally protected. Their attorney, Kate Anderson with the Alliance Defending Freedom, joins us now to talk about this case and the issues we're seeing for parents across the country. Thank you so much for joining us, and also just for fighting back against this. I know that there are so many parents that are seeing similar things in their schools, and they're using this as kind of a roadmap on what maybe they can do to combat this. So I gave kind of the background there. Give me a little bit more information into how this family found out about this and what it did, really to their family and to the relationship with their daughter.
Well, this was an egregious violation of parental rights, as you outlined. This school was actively working with these parents who were very involved with school officials, with their daughter's education, working to try to help with the autistic diagnosis that she had just received to make sure she was getting the support that she needed at home and at school. And all this time, these same people who were meeting with these parents, talking to them about their daughter's well-being, were hiding from them actively the fact that these same officials were socially transitioning their daughter at school from female to present as if she was a boy. They were actually erasing names and altering documents to hide this information from the parents, as well as carefully using their daughter's female name and pronouns when they're talking to the parents, while not using that with the daughter. They found out because of a mistake. A record came home to them with a male name on it. So they confronted the school, asked, did someone else's record get stuck in with their daughters? The school was very odd in their response, and it ended up devolving to where the Meads found out what was going on. And when they confronted the school district about it, school district officials just stood by what they did. They said, this is what we have to do, and you have to understand. Can you imagine government officials telling parents, you have to understand what we're doing to your kid? Parents need to have these decisions. They need to walk through these things with their kids. Kids struggling with something as complicated as gender identity need their parents. And this girl went from really struggling to, once her parents got involved, she's doing really well now. So you see just in this one example how important it is that parents be able to walk through these issues with their kids.
Well, I wonder, though, if that mistake hadn't been made on, some of the paperwork or homework that was sent home, this family would have never really known what was happening at school. And this, as we describe it, social transition that's being made behind the parents' back. And I think a lot of parents out there are probably on alert now, wondering if the same thing could be happening. But there's another element to this, and that's the special needs of this young girl. Having autism, that being already difficult to navigate in and of itself. And I think a lot of parents out there, especially with students and children that have special needs, they're also really worried that their kid is going to be preyed on by administrators and social workers and counselors at school to really, amp up the confusion in a place where these young people are already, confused, as most young people are when they're in school. So what can you say about that and how that plays into what the parents are experiencing, what the daughter is experiencing, and how the school interacted with the parents in regards to that, special need of the child?
Well, parents have the constitutional right to direct the upbringing and education of their kids. So it's an important constitutional right at stake here. And it's a right that's recognized by the Constitution and the courts because we recognize how important it is for parents to be the ones making these decisions. And so when a school district makes these kinds of decisions for a kid without a parent, that damages that child and the parent relationship. And we're seeing this lying aspect of it being particularly concerning because school districts are hiding this information actively from parents. In some cases, we're seeing and hearing from parents where they've even been asking their school district, are you seeing anything unusual about my daughter? I'm worried about their well-being. And the school district officials are actively lying about what's going on at the school. And that drives a wedge between parents and kids because the kids are being taught they should hide this from their parents instead of work through things with the people who love them best and want what's best for them and want to help them with what they're struggling with. So it's a very dangerous cycle to drive this kind of a wedge between parents and kids. And we saw it so much in this case with the Meads, and we're very hopeful that we're going to have a great outcome there. But it's happening across the country, all over the place.
You know, kids spend more time at school, more waking hours at school than they do at home. So that's a lot of time that can be devoted to social transition or anything else that the administration wants to thrust on a child, especially an impressionable young person. But I'm wondering too, what do the Meads, what do they hope to get out of all of this? What resolution do they want that would make them feel like they've not only done something to stand up for their family and their rights, but a larger picture for parental rights as a whole?
Well, Dan and Jennifer Mead have talked to me about, they of course want to protect their own daughter, but they also feel like they can't in good conscience protect their daughter and then go away silently. They can't have another parent come to them and say the same thing happened to my kid and then have to say, oh, I knew about that and I didn't say anything. So bringing awareness to these policies is extremely important, as well as the court wins that we'll be able to pick up. We've already won a case on this issue against the Kettle Moraine School District in Wisconsin, where the court stepped in and said that socially transitioning the girl in that case and not telling her parents and then telling her parents they were going to continue with the social transition even after the parents knew and told them to stop, that was a violation of the Constitution. So we do need the courts, I think, to step in here and stop what's going on. But we also just need to make parents aware. And I know that that's a huge motivation for Dan and Jennifer Mead, is just to let other parents know that they have the freedom and the rights to stand up for their kids. They do not have to take this from schools, and to be able to bring light to this issue.
How difficult is this legally, especially for states that have the rule of thumb being what they refer to as gender affirming care, or, you know, as I would refer to it, gender affirming delusion? So how difficult is it if the school then says, or the counselor then says, hey, no, it's the child that wanted to transition. We are protecting the child. It's the child's choice. So we have a duty to the child. It's what they want. How difficult is that legally to battle against, especially if you've got a child that's confused and they don't really know what's going on? They have been pressured to make this change, or they have been misled to make this change, but the school can play it off as if it's the child's choice, and maybe the child would even attest to that, you know, under pressure or under some kind of incentivized answer put forth by that school. How does that work legally?
Well, the court did not buy that argument from the school district in our Kettle Moraine case and said that that didn't matter. They cannot violate these parents' constitutional rights. And that's right. The Constitution is over all of this. The constitutional freedoms prevail. And so parents' important rights to direct the upbringing and education of their kids is going to prevail here. And it's a very strong constitutional case. But to the medical side of it that you were just mentioning, we're also seeing doctors and experts start coming into this case and start speaking more broadly about this issue, that this is something that kids need their parents to walk alongside them. There's not one size fits all approach to this. Kids are dealing with very complicated issues. Many children struggling with their gender are also struggling with autism, with anxiety, with depression, with other things, and that they need a unique and individualized treatment plan to deal with all that they're dealing with. Whereas the schools are taking an approach that they should just step in, start kids down the path towards transition without any kind of medical backing behind that. So I think on that side of it, that's starting to see the light of day. And it's interesting that schools think they can do this, because these are the same schools that will ask parents permission to give a child an aspirin, to go on a field trip, to participate in extracurricular extracurricular activities of any kind, and yet they think that they can take these significant psychotherapeutic steps in a child's life without telling parents and while actively lying to those parents about it.
I know that, your organization, obviously, it really is an ally for not only parents, but for a number of Americans that just need your support and your backing and are so grateful to have it. I'm also wondering, when it comes to schools, because you've mentioned you've had more than one of these cases, does it matter if it's a private or a public school? Because I think a lot of parents think if they put their kid in an expensive private school that these issues are, not really a problem for their student being in private education. Have you seen other cases in private schools as well, or do you think it's primarily happening in the public schools?
We're hearing primarily from parents in the public schools, but I think that it is a problem in some private schools. Parents have much more control over what's going on in private schools because they're paying for that education. So it's a different legal argument, but parents have much control over it because they're paying for it. Versus in the public schools, it's the constitutional rights that step in more strongly, and it's where we're seeing it more widespread, coming across the country in many, many schools. And I think having a case in Rockford, Michigan, indicates that this doesn't just happen in large metropolitan areas. This is happening in smaller school districts as well. So parents need to be aware of what's going on at their school, pay attention to the policies that are passed by the school boards, the resources that are being given to their kids, because just being informed will help you fight this kind of thing for your own child.
Another part of this is, the book that was passed out to the daughter. I haven't read the book. I would assume it's somewhat inappropriate, though. We've heard a number of titles that have come up, especially over the last few years, in certain places fighting back against having these inappropriate books in school libraries to begin with. But that's a whole other element here beyond just the social transitioning, but then giving a student literature to try to encourage, a different kind of a sexual preference here. What can you tell us about that element of it and what parents need to do, not only to fight back against social transition, but from their student receiving books that are really inappropriate for their grade level and really inappropriate just for a public school system to be passing out?
Well, that's certainly an element in this case. They weren't just changing a name or a pronoun because a child asked for it. They were very actively involved in this social transition, meeting with this child, giving her resources and information like this book that was encouraging this sort of self-discovery of a new gender identity or sexual preference. And the two characters in that particular book, one of those characters is discovering that he's gay and he didn't realize it, and that's sort of the storyline that's being set out. But there's also some fairly inappropriate graphic sexual contact between him and another student. So this is the kind of thing they're planting in these kids' heads, and I understand why parents are concerned about it, and they should be speaking out to their school boards and finding out what's in their libraries and paying attention to this. But that sort of active approach by the schools to give kids resources and to sort of send them down this path goes far beyond just a passive. To the extent they want to say that changing a name is passive, it certainly isn't.
Right.
But it goes far beyond just changing names. They're actually encouraging a transition. And in another case that we're getting involved in, there the school district was giving the student information about medical transition. And I think that's happening more than we think, that they're getting information to find doctors, surgeons, places where they can get hormones with or without parental consent. And those resources are coming through to kids in part through the school districts.
It's so sad. It hasn't been that awful long since I was in school, and we didn't deal with this. I'll tell you that. There was a lot of things that went on in schools, and, a lot of things that maybe I disagreed with educationally or curriculum-wise, but the teachers and administrators were certainly not trying to change our genders or transition us or get us to change our sexual preference. That wasn't part of my upbringing. That wasn't part of my schooling, and it's really sad that parents and students have to deal with this now. That's why, obviously, Alliance Defending Freedom is so fantastic. You guys stepping in and fighting that fight and giving parents the resources and Americans the resources to stand up for their freedoms. Thank you so much for sharing this case with us. Our best to the Meads in their fight and for your ongoing cases. It really is a godsend for so many parents out there, and it gives them a roadmap. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for sharing this story with us.
Thank you for having me on the show.